right, Renaissance men and rock stars, that's a lot. I'm going to start with a question, or throw out a number, 2, random. Be more specific, 2 months. Any guesses? That's how long it took GPT to reach 100 million users. Netflix took 10 years to reach the same milestone. We are not living through change, we are living through acceleration. And it's that acceleration that made the Aura product the topic of today's conversation possible. So with that, good morning. Nice to meet you. For those of you I haven't met, I am going to use a clicker. My name is Mike Nuzzo, as you said, SVP of Data at Hearst. Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me and joining me in this very long 25-minute conversation, but I hope it's fun. My team's objective is pretty simple. It's to make data work harder, smarter, and faster at Hearst for our editors, our marketers, and especially our advertisers. And that has really come to form in the light of Aura in the last year, our first-party ad targeting platform that is powered by AI. And while you said we might not have AI completely figured out, I agree. 10 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, well, at least we were trying. But I do think we're making huge inroads here. And now that we have a little bit about me, I'm told to say this part, so bear with me. Hearst is the world's largest lifestyle publisher. We have 25 iconic brands in the US, like Elle, Esquire, Cosmo, Harper's Bazaar, Runner's World, Car and Driver, Prevention. I'm not going to read these all. We have a global presence with 175 websites, and we have 200 print editions around the world. So we're pretty big. But before I get into Aura, you asked me, actually, what is my conversation about? That blue box was not there earlier. But it's a little bit meaty, and I think I'm going to read this first sentence to you guys and then dissect this, and then the second one, and then we'll stop, I promise. Legacy publishers understandably tout the special value of their first-party data as a hedge against the slow-rolling cookieless future. That's a lot. Like a lot. So I think it means that when publishers talk about the value of their first-party data, we should talk about it through trusted relationships. Because that first-party connections means we don't have to rely on third-party identifiers that we know are slowly going away. Instead, we have real connections with real people, and that's something no algorithm can take away from us, right? That's what I actually think it means to have credibility in a privacy-safe world. And that's what advertisers need to be successful. So moving on to the second sentence. But what is the magic formula for profiling audiences in effective ways, finding market differentiation, and bringing it all to scale? So now you see why it was hard to answer this question, right? Look, I spent a lot of time thinking about a magic formula, and I don't know if there is one per se, but I think at Hearst we found that there are 3 key ingredients to success in the modern marketing era. And so I'll quickly walk you through these, then we'll kind of dissect those as we go. So the first one is a proprietary taxonomy, understanding not just content, but the context of that content, and I think that's very important. The second is real-time signals, what users actually do, not just what they read, what they buy, how they engage with the content, how long they're there, when they're there. And then, of course, adaptive AI that learns and predicts. So a combination of these things, I think that's when we start to see the magic happen. We start to move from profiling to performance and signals to segmentation. But let's be honest, the cookie is slowly going away, we think. There was a joke earlier that by 2035 it might go away, so maybe that will be in our 10-year review as well. But the numbers are stark, and I think it's worth going through this for a second, because our world looks very different than it did 10 years ago. So just as programmatic was starting, and we talked about that evolution of data and identity, the web was 100% addressable roughly 10 years ago. That meant every impression had some sort of identifier attached to it. And that's why programmatic was so successful early on. Fast forward 10 years to today, it's very different. 50% of users, by choice or by default on their device, are using a browser that automatically blocks third-party cookies. So we're half blind already. The people who do have browsers that enable cookies, we see that roughly 40% of them have some sort of blocking technology enabled. That leaves us, this is rough math, by the way, so it's on the record, but don't quote me on this, 30% of an addressable market right now. Said differently, I think this is more impactful. With legacy publishers, 7 out of 10 digital touchpoints are invisible. That's a lot. That's not great. in many ways, cookie deprecation was always theoretical until it wasn't. And I don't think we can talk about it as theoretical anymore because it's real. We have shifted from an open web to a responsible web. And with that, I think we start to see how big data is starting to change as well. So you mentioned 2015 as the evolution of programmatic. I was around in 2016 when big data was a thing. I miss those days, actually. But the idea is, like, we still are going to be doing the same thing that we did. We're just going to have to think about it slightly differently. We're still going to be doing data capture and collection, unification, and segmentation, right? We collect data, we bring it together, and we try to understand it. Why? Because better data and better understanding means more performance for advertisers. I got to go to my notes for this one, because this was good. But big data doesn't impress anyone anymore. I knew there was a good line in there. What it does is how quickly you can act on it, because if you have good data, oh, we're missing a slide. If you have big data, it allows you to know, engage, and personalize, right? And I think that is really important, but that has been around forever too. This idea of personalization has been around since like the HTTP cookie in 1994. So the bigger difference is if we know that cookies are going away, privacy is changing, we've been asking ourselves potentially the wrong questions, I think. We've been asking ourselves for the last 5 years, what do we do to replace the cookie? I'm going to challenge all of us in this room to say, well, maybe we should think about this differently. And I think there are a few publishers who really have leaned into that and said, how do we better think about ad targeting holistically, and how do we better understand our audiences? And in the last 2 years at Hearst, we've really leaned into that question. And I believe that the answer is actually this. With smarter intelligence and not just better data, that means not just artificial intelligence because it's early on, but augmented intelligence. And I'll get into that a little bit later. Oh, these are out of order, but this is still good. No, personalizing it. Okay, so we talked about data changing, personalization changing. I think there's something to be said about personalization as well, right? 10 years ago, this is a good reference point, by the way, it used to be putting your name in the subject line of an email. It worked for a while. It doesn't anymore. Recently, and still today, at least in 30% of it, it means passing around shared IDs and hundreds of identifiers and third-party cookies in every single ad call, which is inefficient and actually not super helpful. And today, on the major platforms like TikTok and Instagram, they are trying to anticipate your every move, what you're going to like, what video you're going to watch, and who you're going to follow. And let's face it, people want personalization, but they don't want surveillance. That line between helpful and creepy is getting thinner than ever. And I think that publishers actually have an advantage because we have that trusted relationship. And if we leverage that trusted relationship, I think we can actually succeed because we have the data. Okay, so we've covered a few things. Cookies are going away, but they're not really going away. Personalization has changed. And the next big topic, and I truly think we're standing at an inflection point now, is AI. That is truly the elephant in the room. In fact, I used AI to make this image, so good for me. If you haven't noticed or haven't thought about it, our industry has been completely chaotic over the last 24 months. Not 10 years, like literally 18 months. 2 years ago, we were completely consumed with the idea of cookie deprecation. Like, that's all we talked about. It was in every conference and every deck, the topic of every conversation. And to a certain extent, it still is, because it was in the first line of this topic. And then came privacy regulations, which we just talked about. Those are happening faster than ever, state by state. It's impossible to keep up with, especially as publishers. It's so hard. And now we have this rise of AI. Oh, and by the way, in case that wasn't enough, consumers are changing the way that they actually engage with content almost hourly, right? Remember when TikTok went down for like 12 hours and like the world was going to end? It didn't, which was good for us. But that's the world that we're living in. It's completely chaotic, but I think that's okay to a certain extent because chaos breeds opportunity. And so I'm going to go back to like where I started this and the question about 2 and 2 months because I think it's worth revisiting. I talked about Netflix reaching 100 million users in 10 years. It's cool. Gmail Took 5 years, a half-life of that. Then we start to see, I would say, like legacy platforms, if we call ourselves legacy publishers, kind of start to emerge. So WhatsApp, Meta, Twitter, somewhere between 3 and 5 years to reach 100 million users. And then you start to see this like rapid adoption of technology and platform. Instagram took 2.5 years to reach 100 million users, which at the time was like completely unheard of. And then came TikTok. It was the first time we saw a platform reach 100 million users in under a year. This took 9 months. But these all had like a kind of utility that was tangible in a way that was like social. You were connecting with your friends, or you're writing an email, you're watching a movie. It had some sort of connection point with like someone or something on the other end. And then came GPT. 2023, they reached 100 million users in 2 months, and you weren't connecting with a human, you were connecting with pixels. It felt like magic, and we all fell in love with it. It completely changed the world, not just for us as publishers, but for us as consumers. Adoption that used to take decades, or change that used to take decades, now happened overnight. It's explosive. AI is changing everything we do, and really, really fast. And with rapid change comes disruption, but I do think that disruption actually breeds opportunity. And for all of us in this room, yes, it's opportunistic for us as consumers, because now we don't have to do a lot, and GPT and AI do it for us, but it's done something completely different, and we're going to stay on this topic for a second, but it's moved from predictive, right? I think for those of us who are in the data space, or tangential to the data space, we were writing algorithms, predictive models, regression models years ago, and those are still like the fundamentals of what AI is today. But we were using it for prediction or proximities. With GPT, we moved from predictive to pervasive, where it moved to like every part of our life. And so I want to talk about how this is reshaping experiences outside of our industry, because I think it'll help us understand our own industry a little bit better. Sorry I bored you, Joetta. She told me she was going to leave. So who here has an iPhone in their pocket or on the table? Okay, so then you have AI at hand. Because when they released the iPhone 16, they announced Apple Intelligence. I also have an iPhone 16. I have no idea what it does. It's terrible. It has Bitmojis or something. But they knew that they had to keep up with Gemini and Google, who were moving faster, and this was their first attempt into AI. Anyone recognize this one? No one? Yes, Amazon. Amazon is using large language models mostly and AI to consolidate hundreds of millions of consumer reviews into bite-sized pieces of content. A couple interesting pieces about this. With TikTok, attention spans have gotten like this. People don't want to read through tons of reviews. Second interesting piece that I think is interesting, they always put the good stuff at the top and like the bad/marginal stuff at the bottom, knowing that we're not going to read the whole thing anymore. And as publishers, I would argue that Amazon is now a publisher. They're creating content. They're just using computers to do it. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we go through this as well. This one, we're a Microsoft shop. I love this one. It helps us with our Excel formulas, our PowerPoints. Clearly, I did not use it on this one because it would have been much more beautiful. And it writes emails for us. And I made a joke in a presentation internally this year that like I use it to write my boss, because she's like, wow, your emails are so much better now. I'm like, yeah, it's because I don't write them. It's like Copilot does. And she's like, you got to teach me how to do that. I'm like, no. That's my secret. And then you start to see, like, this is all like the science side of AI. And then you start to see it bleed into the more art side of AI. In the second half of last year, more specifically November, December timeframe, the Real Magic Studio, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, over at Coca-Cola. It's a team at Coke that's dedicated to AI exploration. They released the first ever fully automated AI commercial. And this was on TV. And if you think about, like, this was the first ever, this is pretty good. There was a little bit of backlash because it was a little different than the traditional Coca-Cola holiday commercials, but it's kind of amazing to think about the first ever made it to television. Okay, so now we're going to start to get into the Aura side of this. We've talked about a lot of like the industry and what it looks like on the back end. I was going through my notes preparing for this, and like 2 years ago when we were actually starting to build Aura, I had scribbled something down on a piece of paper that I think was meaningful then and is meaningful now. It said something like marketplace dynamics and technological innovation equal, and it didn't say Aura at the time because we weren't calling it that, we were calling it something else. But that was the real genesis for Aura, and I think we are living in the perfect storm. Again, AI image, has no one noticed? It's Bourbon Street raining down data. I don't know. I thought I was getting a little silly on Saturday, but I think it's true, right? When we go back to like the Netflix 10 years and GPT 2 years slide, we talked about disruption and opportunity. I think it's impossible to ignore disruption because we're living through it. We have this marketplace pressure, right? We've talked about it. Third-party cookies are vanishing. Regulations are tightening. Consumer trust with brands is at an all-time low. And you see ad costs going up and especially in the display space specifically, performance falling. That's a challenge. On the other hand, we have tremendous opportunity in this storm because we have technological breakthrough, and it's meaningful technological breakthrough. We have AI models that can do prediction in near real time. Cloud computing has advanced from 2016 massively. It can crunch massive data sets so fast so that it can actually feed the AI models. And we have machine learning that actually learns, and it doesn't just like write it to cache and store it there, right? It's dynamic and thinks. And while that's great, big technology companies are out there chasing scale and reach. I think legacy publishers bring something different to the table. In the responsible web, we have 3 things that people cannot take away from us. Editorial trust. At Hearst, we make the joke that our editors are the OG influencers. I'm not an editor. I don't know if that's disrespectful or a compliment, but I think it's a compliment, which allows us to have long-standing audience relationships. We're a 135-year-old company. We have brands like Elle, Esquire, and Cosmo. Think about those brands. They're iconic. But you have to have the editorial there. It has to be searchable. You have to find it, which then has the effect of tremendous first-party data, buckets of it. It is that combination of things that helped inspire us to create Aura, our first-party ad targeting tool. It brings together 3 core components of technology. The first is behavioral data, what people are doing on our site. Contextual signals, what they're consuming, when, why. And of course, our predictive layer, which is our AI model. My slides are out of order, I'm so sorry. Okay. But what brings all of this together is our proprietary taxonomy, which was in our magic formula, the first thing that we talked about. It's editorially driven classification system that spans our entire network. And it doesn't just categorize content, it organizes it into signals that can fuel our AI platform. And here's where it gets really powerful, and I think really interesting for the data folks in the room. We can use all of these things to create vector data sets, right? Multidimensional maps of content and behaviors of users to understand content proximities. Those content proximities allow us to unlock hidden affinities that wouldn't otherwise be noticeable to the human eye. In other words, it doesn't just illuminate user intent, it fuels our AI engine. So on the surface, things that we couldn't see now become visible. And I'm going to walk you through one example. We spent a lot of time, and Melissa will know this, working on a pet food RFP. And one of the things that we noticed was there's this proximity between people who are consuming pet food content and family travelers. And it seems a little desperate at first, but when we got into it, the people who were family travelers were actually planning for every aspect and every member of their family, and that included their pet. And that allowed us to create really, really bespoke, high-performant audiences for both the travel sector, who could now find their people in pet food content, and pet food companies who are trying to find their users in travel content. That is something no third-party cookie or traditional demographic profiling could do. It's only powered by AI, contextual, and behavioral coming together. So I think that's interesting. The other thing that's interesting, we talk a lot about AI as artificial intelligence. I think when we all say AI, that's what we think we mean. At Hearst, we also think about it as augmented intelligence. It doesn't just fuel the computers, it actually augments our own instinct. It makes us work harder, smarter, and faster. So with that, I would love to introduce you to some of the auras, because I think they're worth meeting. I'm going to read these parts, and I have 5 minutes. I'm going to go quickly. But Melissa, thank you for helping me with this. She's been hands-on keyboard, so if you have real questions about these, please ask her. But the auto intender, they're in-market car shoppers ranging from first-timers to gearheads, and they come to Hearst sites like Car and Driver, Road and Track, not just to browse, but to trust our editor's guidance. Because we see these users across lifestyle and auto content, we connect the dots in ways that others can't. By leveraging AI and real-time signals, Aura increases our reach by 36%, and we can find them in new content pathways like gardening, cooking, and sports. Again, those unexpected connections. And it drives performance. Video click-through rates are up 4x. So, another core pillar for us, let's talk wellness. Hearst users and brands like prevention, men's health, women's health are all key to us, which is why we built Health is Wealth, an aura designed around holistic well-being. In this case, we have 20% incremental reach, and we find predictive alignment around health-minded readers who engage with travel guides, home appliances, and cosmetics. And of course, the results, 34% increase in click-through rate compared to basic audience targeting. Healthy audiences equal healthy results. And of course, our Globetrotter. This is our favorite, because who doesn't love to travel? They're drawn to brands like Elle, Town & Country, Esquire for travel ideas and lifestyle inspiration. They start researching Thai street food and end up buying sunscare for the Amalfi Coast. That's the aura difference. We find them in the most unexpected places. And it works, because we see a 2.7x increase in display click-through rate over just contextual targeting alone. So these aren't just personas. They're living, breathing performance cohorts rooted in real-time behavior and enhanced by AI. Aura doesn't just find the right audiences, it finds them in the right place at the right time. And after a year in the market, we found a couple of interesting things. One, this platform now powers 2 out of 3 direct campaigns at Hearst. Content plus AI means greater scale without losing any accuracy. I think that's huge for publishers. That the predictive cohorts are twice as effective at delivering clicks than their traditional counterparts in contextual or behavioral alone. And often the top performers are the ones that your advertisers would be like, that's crazy. Think pet parent and travel. It's also global. I think this is unique to Hearst. It's amazing. We've launched this because it sits on the same tech stack globally earlier this year in our European owned operated markets in the UK, Netherlands, Italy, and Spain, and will be live in our APAC O&O by the end of the year. Okay. So, what does this come down to? I firmly believe that we're at a fork in the road. On one side, you're going to have legacy publishers that talk about their special data. On the other side, you're going to understand that there are going to be publishers that understand that trust plus intelligence equals performance. I'm pretty sure you know which path we've taken. Aura wasn't just a product. It was our proof point. So here's my challenge to everyone in this room. Stop talking about the cookieless future like it's theoretical. It's not. It's real. We talked about it, 30%. Stop thinking that AI is optional, because it's not. It is table stakes. And stop thinking that just having good data is enough. It's how fast you're going to act on it and how intelligently that you use it that will actually make meaningful difference. I wouldn't be up here if I didn't think that legacy publishers have an advantage, and I firmly believe that. We have the trust, we have the data, and now with Aura we have the tools. The future isn't going to be about just massive amounts of data collection. It's going to be about signal interpretation and content connection. Human at the core and intelligent at the edges. Because as much as we want this to be true, it's not. People do not respond to data. We think they do, but they don't. They respond to relevance and resonance. And so perhaps I'm going to throw this out there. The publishers who win aren't going to be the ones who just have the most data. They're going to be the ones who make their users feel the most understood. So if you ask me if there's a magic formula, I actually think that it's truly understanding our audiences, because when we do that, I think we'll all win, us and our marketers. With that, thank you.
All right. Oh, no, you're not off the hook just yet. We enter the dreaded Q&A portion. What questions do you have for Mike? If you can give your name and...
Hi, Shira Center, Boston Globe Media. That was fantastic. It's really terrific what you've built here. So I have two questions for you, both kind of technical. How many auras do you have, and how long did it take to build from inception of this idea to rolling it out into those 4 markets?
It's a great question. I'm from Boston, by the way, so yeah. Hey. We don't disclose how many auras we have, but we used to have thousands of segments, and we moved from thousands to hundreds. So I think that is the first key takeaway there. When you give someone everything, they remember nothing. That was kind of our logic there, and sort of like shrink it down to something that was consumable. And from inception to time in market was actually pretty fast. I think it was probably around 6 months. Yeah. Yeah. And we launched this in June of last year.
Mike, over here. Steve Smith from MediaPost. How, in previous iterations of targeting behavioral contextual, there was always a sort of a feedback loop from data that helped inform editorial and helped in further product development as you started seeing these affinities across different groups that you may not have anticipated from the editorial side. Is that feedback still possible in advanced AI systems where this is all happening on such a highly personalized basis and in real time to give data back to the editorial team so that can aid in product development to capture these audiences from a content perspective?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, and it ties in with the first question actually, is if you think about the auras as kind of content collections themselves, right, like travel content with the Globetrotter and Pet Parent, you could analyze the entirety of that segment and give insights back to the editorial team, I think, in ways that we couldn't before. And the AI is actually just amplifying that. So I think the answer is absolutely yes, and it's only gotten stronger and faster. Does that help?
Have you put it in place? I mean, are there devices, or are there ways in which you can report back to the editorial team?
I talked about the Aura tool today, the platform tomorrow. We're going to be launching something in the coming weeks that will be speaking to that, yes.
All right, any other questions?
I see a hand. Oh. I think I see a hand in the back. You're right, by the way. This is a very bright light.
Hi, Kylie from The Independent. First of all, I think this is amazing. And I was really interested in how you were talking about like the connection between the pet, the pet food and the family travelers. And you've created the Aura, and it has a segment and a persona. My question is, early feedback with agencies and people that are trying to target directly into certain audiences, how are they receiving this sort of segment and justification that these are in fact, people you should be going after when it doesn't fit in their boxes?
That is such a good question, and probably one of the hardest things we've had to deal with in the last year is exactly that. Because I don't think it's so much that they're fighting the audience, we're still fighting against demographics and third-party cookies. If you can show the connection, which we do, we have marketing materials behind it, and then the proof points of click-through rates up, view-throughs are going through, it's a little bit more consumable to them, but there is still a little bit of a mental mapping that has to go on there, which is often why we don't just put one Aura on a plan. We will tuck them in with the one they want, and we'll give them the surprising one on the side just to close out.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Hi, this is Upneet from LH2. Wanted to understand that, is this a completely internal tool, or do you envisage perhaps making this as a SaaS platform and perhaps help giving it out to other publishers in the future?
No, I think it's an internal tool that will remain internal for the foreseeable future.
How you doing? Mike, MJD. Question is regarding proprietary taxonomy versus existing standard IAB, and I think within 12,000 some segments and subsegments. Wonder what was missing for you to kind of roll out proprietary taxonomy, which at some point may be damaging on programmatic demand since it won't match the standard DSPs.
I think to separate programmatic out from this, because this powers low, like I said, 2 out of 3 direct campaigns, there's nothing wrong with the IAB taxonomy. It works. We use it for many things. I think I'll give you an example of something, because I said it was editorially informed, we set a lot of trends as an editorial team. Things like quiet luxury is something that the IAB taxonomy does not capture, and yet so many luxury clients want to understand how to capitalize on a trend. And so a proprietary taxonomy augments an IAB taxonomy or a third-party taxonomy. It is not meant to replace, but we use it interspersed with it if we need it.
Last question.
Hi, Danielle McMurray from the AARP Media Ad Network. Question for you about performance. What sort of reporting do you provide back to the advertisers on these? Is there a profile and they may look at it and decide, wow, that's what my customer looks like? And separate from the CTRs being, showing a lift, are they tracking conversions also and seeing that these are working on the conversion side?
Yeah, conversions are a little bit harder because they're off of our platform. We do conversion tracking if and when needed. One of the other metrics, we do provide 2 other metrics, engagement rates, which we've seen up double digits, so like how long is someone engaging with the ad, and brand lift we run on these campaigns, and those are also seeing increase. And then, of course, to your first part of the question about like the persona piece, we do provide insights about the audience in addition to hard metrics like click-through rate, brand lift, and that sort of stuff.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.